To grasp what is being proposed in the book and in this presentation, and to understand that what is being proposed is actually not as far-fetched as it may initially seem to be, the reader should understand that these two hypotheses were created, as a consequence of what has been revealed in quantum experimentation, along with the author's attempt to solve the measurement problem. Thus, it is recommended that the reader knows about and understands the double-slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments. There are several YouTube videos that explain these experiments very well. It would also be helpful to have some understanding of several quantum behaviors, such as quantum entanglement, non-locality and wave-particle duality. The four states of reality brings forth two hypotheses, which together define the universe to be a simulation that gets expressed within our consciousness. The most comprehensive of the two hypotheses is the re-illusion hypothesis, as it defines how the universe is created within our minds, rather than our minds existing within, and separate from a universe that has a physical presence. The other is called the two spectrums of energy hypothesis. The two spectrums of energy hypothesis defines how the electromagnetic spectrum of energy, and another spectrum of energy that is currently referred to as dark energy by the general scientific community, are two separate systems of code and data from within the quantum and the subquantum levels of order, respectively. From within our large-scale perspective, each of these two systems of code and data function as its own spectrum of energy, from within our reality. In accordance with the re-illusion hypothesis and the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, knowledge is at the foundation of what our reality is about, for the universe was created for us to perceive, and it only exists within our conscious perspective. The reason the author believes this, and why he created the re-illusion hypothesis and the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, is partly from his interpretation on how the measurement problem can be solved, as well as his interpretation for the reason why the quantum level does not obey the same physical laws that the universe does, as we function within the level of our reality. A portion of this presentation will focus on what is occurring in the measurement problem, as proposed within the re-illusion hypothesis and the two spectrums of energy hypothesis. These two hypotheses will also offer an explanation for what is going on in many spooky quantum phenomena, such as non-locality, wave-particle duality and quantum entanglement, to name just a few. For example, what we are able to know about a quantum particle appears to change how it will behave, as is demonstrated in the double-slit experiment and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment also appears to demonstrate that what we know about a quantum particle in the present moment can change what has occurred to its entangled particle in the past. These examples in particular seem to reveal that our consciousness and quantum particles are interconnected in a way that we don't understand and that appears to contradict what is able to occur within the laws of physics, as we presently understand them. The re-illusion hypothesis and the two spectrums of energy hypothesis offer an explanation for these phenomena. The reader should know that there are those who question if what appears to be revealed in these as well as other quantum experimentation is truly what is actually occurring, but there are many who believe that the evidence is too overwhelming to suggest otherwise. The re-illusion hypothesis defines a system of physics that creates consciousness and our reality from within a complex, multidimensional, virtual reality program-like process that utilizes two separate systems of code and data. Thus, our reality is created within a process that is analogous to a program from within another program. Our conscious perspective, along with the creation of consciousness itself, is initiated within the quantum level of order, as the product of quantum particles that function within the electromagnetic spectrum of energy, and that interact together within the standard model of particle physics. This system of code and data is referred to as the electromagnetic, quantum, data state, for in accordance with the re-illusion hypothesis, quantum particles are fundamentally data. Our perspective exists within a simulation that has been integrated into our consciousness, that is created from the electromagnetic, quantum, data state, within the standard model of particle physics, and within the physics of all the other branches of science. To the contrary, our physical essence along with the entire universe, with the exception of our consciousness, exists within another, non-electromagnetic based system of data that precedes the creation of the electromagnetic spectrum of energy, in its level of order. This system of data is called the quantum time factor system of data, which is referred to as the QTF data state. Since the QTF data state precedes the quantum level of order, it does not take part in the standard model of particle physics, or perhaps, just not in the standard model as we presently understand it. Our reality exists within our consciousness, and the creation of our consciousness is initiated within the quantum level of order, from within the standard model of particle physics and within the electromagnetic, quantum, data state. Thus, the reillusion hypothesis proposes that we exist within both systems of data. We, meaning, the merger of our physical essence, and our consciousness. Our physical essence as well as the physical essence of the entire universe, have no physical expression from within the QTF data state, for everything in the QTF data state exists as QTF data, which has no ability to be expressed or simulated in any manner, and consciousness does not exist within the QTF data state. Thus, the QTF data state is analogous to a computer program within a computer hard drive, before it is processed within the computer hardware, and expressed within a visual and audio format that we can perceive, except, the QTF data state also has all the information to create consciousness, but it lacks a small amount of QTF code, that adds electromagnetic properties to it. The lack of this code keeps the QTF data state from initiating consciousness within the standard model. The reason why knowledge is at the foundation of our reality is that there is a process that takes place within the subquantum level of our brain, within the QTF data state, that adds the missing QTF data to the QTF data state of a perspective that an observer had observed, via using one or more of their five senses, and converts what the observer perceived from within the embodiment of QTF code and data, into the electromagnetic, quantum, data state. By adding an electromagnetic charge to the QTF data state of a perspective, it results in the physics of the standard model, initiating the creation of conscious perspective, as well as consciousness itself. Until an observer directly interacts with something from within the QTF data state, which occurs within a totally virtual-like process, where there is no expression of a universe, no expression of an observer, and nothing has any physical expression, the universe as the observer knows it to be, simply ceases to exist within that observer's reality, for there is no universe out there, except as the embodiment of QTF data. Therefore, during this presentation, whenever something is referred to have occurred, or to be occurring within the QTF data state, the reader should understand that this refers to it occurring within the embodiment of QTF code and data, where there is no expression of that, which is said to be being perceived, no expression of the observer, and nothing exists with any physical expression. That which occurs within the QTF data state, doesn't become simulated, until and if, it is perceived by a conscious living being, which also initially occurs within the embodiment of QTF code and data. As will be explained, since we act with free will, consciousness has control of our actions, and what we do, so that in a manner that is counterintuitive to how we believe we function within our reality, consciousness controls what is coded to occur within the QTF data state, as it pertains to what we will do in the next moment. During each present moment of our reality, the QTF data state contains the data pool for the past, the present and the entire future of the universe, with the exception of the actions that conscious, sentient beings will do, and the effects that those actions will have in the future. As we experience each moment of our reality, any effect that our actions will have in the universe, within the present as well as in the future, are edited into the QTF data state as the actions are occurring. In this manner, The same QTF data state functions as a blueprint of the universe for everyone's reality, while we act with free will. Aside from our actions, everything else that happens in the present moment and that will happen in the future, happens via the inanimate physics of the universe, and thus, the landscape of the universe within each present moment of our reality, was coded to occur within the QTF data state, long before it is perceived by us within our reality, unless it was affected by the actions of a conscious sentient being. The inanimate physics of the universe embodies all the knowledge that mankind has discovered, and that we will discover in the future, within all the branches of science, as well as within those branches of science that we have not yet come to identify. The inanimate physics of the universe controls everything that will happen, how it will occur, and when it will occur within the universe, down to each Planck moment, and within each Planck volume of space, as long as there are no disturbances from our actions. From within the embodiment of the inanimate physics, the evolution and aging of every Planck location within the entire universe, from its start within the Big Bang, until its demise many billions of years later, is already contained within the QTF data state. To the contrary, because we act with free will, the inanimate physics of the universe are not in control of what we will do from one moment to the next moment, although, they are in control of how we do it, for our actions function within the laws of physics from within the inanimate physics of the universe. Thus, the QTF code of our actions must be written within the QTF data state, just the moment before we do something within our reality. This occurs within a system of physics called the animate space-time continuum. The animate space-time continuum embodies a set of physics that allows our consciousness to control what we will do, from moment to moment, so that we can act with free will within a universe, where everything must be coded within the embodiment of QTF code and data, before we do it, and perceive it within our conscious perspective. The animate space-time continuum functions in a manner that is somewhat analogous to an incredibly immense and powerful virtual reality computer program, that functions within the embodiment of two sets of data, the QTF data state and the quantum data state. Aside from what an observer perceives within their own unique conscious perspective, the rest of the universe exists solely within the embodiment of QTF code and data, with no physical expression from within that observer's reality. Only that, which the observer is directly interacting with via using one or more of his or her five senses, allows the observer to form knowledge of it, which causes the QTF data state of the perspective to be converted into the observer's simulated reality, within the electromagnetic quantum data state. This all occurs within the physics of the animate space-time continuum. That which we are not directly interacting with from within the landscape of our reality, will exist as a reallusion. A reallusion is an object that we perceive to be there as a function of perceiving some form of electromagnetic radiation that is coming from the object, so that its matter is not what we are perceiving. As will be explained, space and waves of electromagnetic radiation are always a reallusion within our reality. Since consciousness has the ability to remember the past, while simultaneously perceiving the present moment and anticipating the next moment to come, consciousness interconnects the past, the present and the future, together within our stream of consciousness. Within our perspective, our stream of consciousness creates a linear timeline of a three-dimensional universe, from within a universe where all past, present and future moments exist simultaneously. Thus, from within the large-scale level of our reality, consciousness creates the motion of time, from within a universe that is temporally inert, analogous to a reel of movie film sitting on the shelf, or a movie recorded on some other media that is not being viewed. Much of the above likely seems far-fetched, because it is counterintuitive to how we perceive the universe and our own physical essence. This is because the reallusion hypothesis and the two spectrums of energy hypothesis were created as a result of that, which has been revealed in quantum mechanical experiments, such as the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments, along with the author's attempt to solve the measurement problem. For example, By creating the knowledge of a photon's which path, as is done in the above experiments, it causes the particle's wave function to collapse, so that the particle's energy will occupy a single point in space and time from within our reality, which is the definition of the electromagnetic quantum data state, after being processed within the Standard Model, and within the physics of all the other branches of science. In accordance with the reillusion hypothesis, the universe was created for us to perceive, so that only the particle state of the wave-particle complex gets simulated within the electromagnetic quantum data state to create our conscious perspective. In accordance with the reillusion hypothesis and the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiments also reveal that only that which is possible for us to know can be coded to occur within the QTF data state. This is because the universe was created for us to perceive. Thus, any object or event that is impossible for us to know, either as a reillusion, or by directly interacting with it, cannot occur within the universe. This is a profound aspect of the physics of our reality, and understanding this is fundamental in solving the measurement problem, as will be explained. To directly interact with something means that we use one or more of our five senses to gain the knowledge of it. This includes just being able to observe the recorded data of a quantum level event as is done in the double slit experiment, or by being able to gain the same knowledge from the way that the experimental apparatus is set up, as is done in the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. Within our day-to-day large-scale reality, knowledge is gained by either perceiving a reillusion, or by directly interacting with something. In the double slit and the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, the photon's which path does not have to be seen by an observer's own eyes, nor does it have to be known by anyone for the which path event to become knowledge, and for the event to have occurred within the QTF data state of the universe. As long as an event is not impossible for a conscious, sentient being to be able to gain the knowledge that the event has occurred, and even if no one ever gains the knowledge, or, if they do, they didn't realize that the knowledge was gained in what they have observed, the event can occur within the QTF data state of the universe that we all share. Thus, for something to occur within the QTF data state of the universe, does not require that an observer will ever gain the knowledge of the event, or that any observer directly observed the event, for as long as it was not impossible for the observer to have gained the knowledge of the event occurring, and whether or not the observer was aware that there was knowledge present in what they observed, the event can occur within the QTF data state of the universe. In the double slit experiment that is performed by using a single photon, rather than two entangled photons, the detection of the which path occurs at one of the double slits, but in order for knowledge to have been created, the detection process must not only have occurred, it must also exist within the universe in such a way that it is not impossible for an observer to gain the knowledge, and the knowledge must continue to exist within the universe until the photon reaches the detection screen. If these two criteria have been met, the photon's wave function will have been collapsed, and the photon will reach the screen as if it propagated through the space between the double slits and the screen, as a particle, rather than within a wave, and Schrödinger's equation will not be in effect when the particle reaches the screen within the QTF data state of the event. If these two criteria were not met when the photon reached the screen, the photon's wave function will not have been collapsed at the time of the detection, and the photon will reach the screen within a quantum wave function, in accordance with Schrödinger's equation. This appears to erase the which path knowledge within the universe, since the photon's which path had been detected, but in actuality, the which path knowledge was never created within the QTF data state to begin with, since it was impossible for any conscious sentient being to have gained the knowledge. This is because the universe only exists within our minds, and thus, its purpose is for us to perceive it, or to be able to know what has, and is occurring within it, even if the knowledge is gained in an indirect way, such as within recorded data, or by detecting which screen the photon was absorbed into. If something is impossible for any observer to have knowledge about it, under any set of circumstances that are possible to occur, the event will not occur within the universe. Thus, even though the detection had occurred, there was no recorded data created about it, and therefore, no knowledge existed in the universe for an observer to know, and the photon's wave function will not have been collapsed. If two entangled photons are used as is done in the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, and one of the entangled photons labeled photon A, goes to a detector screen, without its switch path being known, while the other entangled photon, called photon B, had its switch path detected, it will cause photon A to reach the screen without being associated with a wave function, even if photon B's switch path was detected after photon A reached the screen. This reveals retrocausality had occurred from within our temporal perspective, but within the non-temporal manner that the universe exists when not being simulated within an observer's conscious perspective, retrocausality is an irrelevant concept. Understanding this is at the heart of solving the measurement problem and understanding how our reality is created, which requires understanding the non-temporal nature of the QTF data state, and the relationship between the QTF and the electromagnetic, quantum data states, and how our reality is a product of that relationship. Unlike that which we cause to occur within the above two quantum experiments, during our day-to-day reality, we constantly change what had already been coded to occur within the QTF data state of the universe long before we perceive the event. Under these circumstances, the event that was changed is a large-scale level event that had only one possible outcome, rather than a quantum level event such as detecting a particle's switch path, and making the knowledge knowable, which created two possible outcomes. For example, as the moonlight reaches the Earth, it had been coded to reach the Earth, within a particular location and a particular time, within the QTF data state, long before it happens within our reality. Possibly, billions of years before it happens in our reality, for the entire future of the universe may have been coded, at the onset of the creation of the universe from within the QTF data state. As we walk outside on a clear night, our bodies block the moonlight from reaching the ground, where it had originally been coded to reach the Earth. As we block the moonlight from reaching where it had previously been coded to contact the Earth, the animate space-time continuum within that observer's mind rewrites the QTF data state of the event, as it writes the QTF data state of the observer's action, prior to the QTF data state of the event being converted to the electromagnetic, quantum data state within the observer's mind. To the contrary, when we use only one non-entangled photon in the double-slit experiment to create the photon's switch path knowledge, the detection creates two possible quantum outcomes that could occur. The photon could reach the screen, either within a wave function, or not within a wave function. These outcomes include the consequence of what a conscious sentient being will do, which cannot be predicted by the inanimate physics of the universe, and thus, the QTF data state of the conclusion of the event cannot be written within the QTF data state until the photon reaches the screen. If no one destroys the switch path data before anyone knows the switch path knowledge, the photon will not reach the screen within a quantum wave function. But, if someone destroys the switch path data before the photon reached the screen, the photon will reach the screen within a quantum wave function. In the case of using two entangled photons, as was described in the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment example, retrocausality occurs with respect to photon A, no matter how much longer it takes photon B to reach the screen, as long as no knowledge of photon A's switch path existed in the universe in a way that was possible for an observer to know, before it reached the screen. The universe was created for us to perceive, and everything we do and perceive occurs within the QTF data state before it occurs in our reality. Therefore, the universe knows what we know, and what we do, before we do it, and before we know it. This is why the QTF data state of the photon will change its behavior, in accordance to what we are able to know and what we do. Let's talk about what is, and what is not included within the simulation of our reality. Only that which we can directly interact with will be simulated within each moment of our reality, a Planck scale moment before we consciously perceive doing it. Space itself cannot be directly interacted with by one or more of our five senses, unless electromagnetic energy or some form of matter occupies the space. This is because space has no quantum beginning in accordance with the two spectrums of energy hypothesis, and space does not take part within the Standard Model. But, things such as air, the point particle expression of a photon, and large-scale objects that are made from matter and that occupy space, can be directly interacted with, by one or more of our five senses, and become known. Thus, they can be simulated within the electromagnetic, quantum data state to be perceived as occupying a point in space and time, and to be occupying three spatial dimensions, as we directly interact with it, so that space becomes passively integrated into our perspective as we perceive that, which has been simulated. In this manner, we perceive space as a function of perceiving an object, some form of matter, or electromagnetic radiation, by using one or more of our five senses. Space, all by itself, is never simulated within our reality, because it has no quantum beginning that takes part in the Standard Model of particle physics, or perhaps, just not within that part of the Standard Model that we have identified to date. Space is therefore always a reillusion within our reality. A reillusion can also be an object such as the moon, all the stars that we see as we look up into the night sky, as well as an object that we see, but that we are not directly interacting with, such as the objects that we are not touching, within a room that we are in. We believe that it is the object's physical expression that is causing us to see it as we look at the moonlight and the starlight, or the objects that we are not touching within a room we are in, as we are directly interacting with the light or other wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation by using our eyes or other senses. Although the physical matter of the moon and all the stars, as well as all the objects that are within the landscape of our reality that we are not directly touching, have a physical expression created by their matter, within the embodiment of QTF code and data, their matter is not being simulated within each of our realities as we look at them, for they are not made from quantum particles within our perspective. In this circumstance, their expression is created within our brain as one or more of our five senses gathers electromagnetic waves of visible light, and other wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation, that become particles within our sensing organs, within the QTF data state of the perspective. When many of those point particles from within the many waves of electromagnetic radiation reach one or more of our sensing organs within the QTF data state of the event, they create electrochemical responses within the sensing organ that gathered them, which get sent to the sensing centers of our brain, which creates the perspective, initially within the QTF data state of our brain, where no actual electromagnetic properties exist. It's this QTF data perspective that lacks any true electromagnetic charge, from within the subquantum level of our brain, that gets converted into an electromagnetic, quantum perspective, which then gets simulated into our consciousness. Therefore, the QTF data state functions as the non-electromagnetic blueprint of the past, the present and the future of the entire universe, as it is the initial data state of everything that we perceive, as well as the rest of the universe that we don't perceive. It allows us to perceive the objects that are functioning within the electromagnetic spectrum of energy and as being corporeal, as the QTF data state of those components of our reality get converted into the electromagnetic, quantum data state. The QTF data state also allows us to perceive those objects, space, and electromagnetic waves of radiation, that are reillusions within the landscape of our reality within a specific moment, and that continue to exist solely within the QTF data state. Space is a special type of reillusion within our reality, because space is never simulated, and it exists and behaves only as a function of the objects that we perceive as being three-dimensional, either as being corporeal or as reillusions, and how those objects appear to us, as they move and behave in relation to each other. Space all by itself is never simulated. Thus, the vacant space between us and other objects, as well as the space between two or more objects, is always an illusion as well as a reillusion in our reality. As we look up into the night sky, the matter of the moon, the stars, and the space between us and these celestial objects, is not being simulated, except for the photoluminescence that occurs within the air and other molecules in the atmosphere, as we perceive the photons from them that reached our eyes from within waves of electromagnetic radiation, from within the QTF data state of the event. As we move through space, as we either walk from one room to another room, or pass through the space between New York to Los Angeles within a jet plane, or within a spaceship to Mars, the only space that passively gets simulated into our reality is from the three dimensions that either electromagnetic radiation, air, or matter take up, as they exist within the QTF data state of the perspective. It's not the empty space that is being simulated in these instances. Nothing in our reality is actually out there, but when we directly interact with something, the objects that we perceive we are directly interacting with can be deconstructed into molecules, atoms, and even quantum particles from within our perspective, and they function within the physics of all the branches of science, so that they feel and behave as if they are corporeal. To the contrary, empty space itself, aside from the matter or the electromagnetic energy that we directly interact with within the space, does not consist of quantum particles, and therefore, it is not being simulated within our reality. We only believe it is, for real illusions are perceived as being just as real as an object that we are directly interacting with. As we look up into the night sky, the only things that are being simulated within our reality in this instance is the moonlight, the starlight, and the light that is emanating from the air in the Earth's atmosphere that is undergoing photoluminescence, and that our visual cortex transforms into the perspective of a three-dimensional volume of space, and the celestial objects that are far off into the cosmos. One reason that only that, which we directly interact with, gets converted into the electromagnetic, quantum data state, and simulated within our perspective, while the rest of the landscape within each moment of reality consists of real illusions that exist within the QTF data state, is for efficiency. If the entire landscape of each moment of our reality was being simulated, our brains would have to be much more powerful, and be able to process much more data. Think about how much energy would be needed to create a universe that exists in the way we have always believed it did, versus if the universe existed as a type of data. It's most likely a matter of efficiency that our reality is a simulation, and that most of the landscape within each moment of the simulation is made up of real illusions. Thus, the vast majority of our reality is formed from real illusions, rather than everything within the landscape of each moment of our reality being simulated within each of our minds. Only that, which we directly interact with, needs to be perceived as being corporeal and to function within the physics of all the branches of science, so that it feels and behaves as if it was being created by things that are out there, and external to our physical essence. Since objects that are not being directly interacted with do not need to function as being corporeal, they do not need to feel like they are corporeal, and the quantum particles of their matter does not need to be simulated. Therefore, only the part of the object's matter that an observer directly interacts with will be simulated and will feel and function as being corporeal, while the rest of the object's matter will be a real illusion within the observer's reality. We do not perceive any of this to be occurring, for the entire object will be perceived to be there, and feel as if it is functioning within the physics of the universe, as a function of it being a real illusion. For example, as we swing a baseball bat, the entire bat is perceived to be corporeal, and to have a certain amount of mass, weight, inertia, momentum, and its entire mass is perceived to be under the influence of the entire Earth's gravity. This is because the entire bat and the entire Earth exist within the embodiment of QTF code and data, while we directly interact with a small portion of the bat's mass. In actuality, as we hold the bat, only the matter that we directly touch will be simulated into the quantum particles that will take part in the standard model of particle physics, and within the physics of all the branches of science, to form the matter of that part of the bat, within our conscious perspective. The rest of the bat's matter, mass, weight, inertia, momentum, and the gravity exerted on the bat from the entire Earth, are all real illusions that we feel and perceive, as a function of how the mass of the entire bat and the gravity from the entire Earth are coded to interact together within the QTF data state, and within the physics of all the branches of science. Therefore, as an observer swings the bat, the forces that are created from the mass and weight of the entire bat, as well as the gravity being exerted on us and the bat from the entire Earth's mass, are all felt within the observer's reality as they swing the bat, even though only the matter of the bat that the observer holds in his or her hands, is being simulated within the observer's reality. The rest of the bat, with regard to its physical appearance and how it feels, its total mass, its weight, its momentum and inertia, as well as the effect that the entire Earth's gravity has on the bat, are all real-illusions within the observer's reality. Thus, as we directly interact with matter that is simulated within the electromagnetic, quantum data state, the QTF data state is passively integrated into our reality, as a real-illusion. Some part of an object that we are directly interacting with, needs to function as being corporeal within our reality, by behaving within the physics of all the branches of science, so that it can passively integrate how the entire object interacts with the rest of the universe, into our reality, as a real-illusion. When trying to conceptualize what is being proposed, keep in mind that the physics of our reality works within intervals of time that approach the Planck scale, so that within each perceived second of our reality, the physics of the real-illusion process is occurring over and over again, quadrillions of times. This is analogous to a movie that has quadrillions of frames being created per second, which is much faster than we are able to probe and evaluate. Therefore, as an observer swings the bat, all of the inertia, the momentum, the tactile perception, as well as the kinetic energy that is exerted on the entire mass of the ball, and on the entire mass of the bat when the ball contacts the bat, is integrated into the observer's reality, as a real-illusion from within the QTF data state of the event, many quadrillions of times within each fraction of a second of the observer's perspective. This causes the observer's perspective of the event, to be as real, as if the bat and the ball were truly out there, within a universe that exists externally to the observer's self, and to his or her consciousness. Please go to the next part of the presentation.